Patty, that's beautiful.
That's what Nixon should have thought of.
It happens too. Right. If he only burned them all, he wouldn't have had any trouble with it.
Are we back in business again?
I've one quick announcement. Pat,
Mary, do you have a motion?
Let Rick read it. He can do it better than I can. I think Jane wanted the floor.
could I have a quick announcement just before everybody starts scattering out? There'll be a press conference here Tuesday morning after we give the charter to the Assembly on Monday night. And any and all commissioners are, no, at 9 o'clock Tuesday morning.
Press conference?
Yes. Any and all commissioners are encouraged to be here, but particularly the chairman and the vice chair.
Particularly what?
You.
Oh. And is this on the, this is in lieu of the one that Dave Harbour was going to arrange?
Yeah, he wanted to scoop the other paper on. Oh. Okay. Yes, this is in lieu of that one.
Yeah.
9:30?
9 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday.
And be positive. Oh, don't be positive.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not perfect, but can you do any better? No.
Yeah,
Keep it.
man. And don't think they won't.
Is it alright if I say it sucks?
All right.
What?
That is a vulgar.
Common term used by today's young people.
Well, I know. Young people, he blames it on the young people. It comes out of his
Call
mouth.
this meeting back to order. Recess is over and
Jane has been
school is
programmed properly.
in session again.
Didn't use that word.
So, Mr. Garnett, read us the motion that's proposed.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Please.
Oh, good. That's so positive. I like the positive approach.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me you have before you for approval section 13. So perhaps what would be appropriate would be the amendments to section 13 that are needed and then to reopen section 6.
Yeah, the amendment to 13 is what he's going to read, which would be in essence striking this and moving it.
Also title change.
Which could be done, I think, in one action, if it meets the approval of the group. Now, Mr. Garnett?
Okay, Mr. Chairman. As I understand what's proposed, the sentence in line 15 of 1305, the school district budget may be increased or decreased only to the full amount, is deleted. Looking again only to the changes in 1305 for a moment, they would also be added after the word budget in line 17 and possibly after fiscal year in line 18, the words of the municipality.
Could that be read now again?
Then it would read, the assembly may increase or decrease any item. I would suggest eliminating the word appropriated, by the way.
Where are you at?
In the beginning,
13.
line 13 of 1305. And may add or delete items in the proposed operating or capital budget of the municipality. The assembly shall approve the budget of the municipality as amended and appropriate the necessary funds at least 21 days prior to the end of the fiscal year of the municipality, subject to style changes. And the rest is unchanged by our discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should add municipality in the title between the budget, the municipal budget, because we're talking about
Where?
in the title, section 1305, assembly action on the municipal budget, because that's all we're speaking to in 1305 now.
Okay, are all of those?
Mr. Chairman, while we're also dealing with 1305, I think elimination of the word appropriated is appropriate because the Assembly at this point is dealing with the budget proposed by the mayor, not with something that has been appropriated. And, you know,
yeah.
we're just talking about an item in the proposed budget.
Ms. Parker?
Jane moved and I seconded that we still do that.
Question?
Moved by Jane, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, so ordered. Now,
No, Mr.
I would like to have this, while we're doing it, handle the reopening of section 6 for changes.
605.
Mr. Chairman, I move to lay 13 on the table until we complete action on, or go back and complete action on section 605.
Second, last, unanimous consent.
Is there a second?
Second and ask unanimous consent. No objection.
Aye.
Hearing no objection, unanimous consent. How do you handle that?
You've done it.
You're there.
You're
That's
done.
all.
There's no objection.
Mr.
No
Chairman,
objection.
please read to the new sentence, please.
Mr. Chairman, in 605, the only change, in accordance with the earlier changes to 1305, is to add the sentence in line 29. The Assembly may increase or decrease the budget of the school district only as to total amount. We do not put in a sentence providing that within X days, if the Assembly does not approve the school board budget, it becomes effective, because there is a provision to that effect in state law now, which is binding on us. Now, that is a choice, but that's the state of the law.
We've done that frequently, have we not?
I believe so.
Just a minute.
We
Say that
put-
again, the Assembly may increase or decrease the budget of the school district. What?
Only as to total amount. And we do that largely as to reassure the school district, as I understand it. That also is a matter of state law, which we could not change.
Well, if they want reassurance on one, they want reassurance.
That is possible.
I don't believe so. I think
Well-
they're fairly happy with the other, there.
I wonder why you even put it in. Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Josephson?
I question not adding the other item, because I understand that the Assembly School Board controversies around the state are very volatile, and there's always seems to be legislation pending to change that material, and why should we encourage that kind of thing from Anchorage?
In other words, if state law changed, we still would be protected if it were written in.
Oh, and then you'd get into a...
May I make a comment in relation to that? The school district officials that I talked to said that if we ever get into a year-round school district thing, that then at that time it would be just as logical for them to have the same fiscal year as the municipality has. But until they get into school year-round operation, they'd like the other. And I don't know whether we need to speak any farther than what we have to reassure them.
Well,
President, what is the time limit that it has to be?
60 days. The school board has to submit its budget by April 1, which is 90 days before the end of its fiscal year. And if the Assembly does not approve it within 30 days thereafter, it's automatically approved as submitted.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Ms. Josephson. I think that just a simple statement that reflects the state law would be appropriate. We speak to the...
Then can we use the 90 days rather than saying April 1, because 90 days before the end of the...
Well, sure, we've used 90 days when we
That
talk
would
about
open
the
for the
submission.
other change.
The change that Arliss, I think, has in mind would be the Assembly shall approve the budget of the school district as amended and appropriate the necessary funds at least 60 days prior to the end of the fiscal year of the school district. It's a counterpart to the 1305 sentence.
But then we better also make sure that they submit it to the Assembly at least 90 days.
We've got that already in
Already
605.
in 605. Ms. Parker?
Why haven't we put all of the items pertaining to the school district budget within the section on school district
That's
and
where
the
we-
budget?
That's where we're moving now. We're moving it to
within,
605.
everything within Article 13 on finance?
No,
No, we're moving it to budget and 6-year plan, 605.
Mr. Chairman, I guess it does get kind of, one thing leads to another, because there is the sentence here, for instance, in 1305, which says, if this assembly does not approve it within the time stated, it's automatically approved, and of course we do not have that in the school district provision. So it's a question of taking a bigger bite maybe.
Ms. Parker?
My question is that, if we've taken this section out of assembly action in the budget, then why throughout Article 13 have we mentioned the school district budget when possibly we should have mentioned it in education?
Do we have other references? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Where are they, Lisa?
section 1306,
1301.
1301, 1303, if you want to interpret it that way, you can interpret 1303.
Where's the reference to the school board in 1306?
I don't see it 1306.
1306 be accepted to the school budget.
Well,
I
that's
don't find it.
okay, on page 7.
B, page
Page 19.
19.
Okay.
Okay, I think the first sentence is in order in 13. But the second one, the school board may transfer all or part of any unencumbered balance, may now be more
Logically put in
logical
other
like
places.
Title 6.
So then we wouldn't have to have such a conflict between municipal budgets and school district budgets if we
Put them all.
kept the two separate in two separate articles.
Right.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, that sounds like a reasonable stylistic change to separate the two completely if we can.
I don't know if that's desirable or not.
The assembly
You can keep them totally in
Yeah,
one,
well, I agree.
or keep them totally separate. Instead of confusing people by having a little bit over here and a little bit over there.
There are some problems.
have.
Oh.
How do you see, we have in front of us at the moment a motion.
We don't have one.
Well, no, Rick just stated the second portion of that, moving section 1305, the assembly, so forth, shall approve the budget of the school district as amended, moving that into, or adding that to 605.
That was moved.
Do you understand a consensus on this
That
matter
was
in
moved.
regards to our discussion, or do you want a motion?
Parker,
A motion.
okay.
What?
Well, the motion, as I understand it for us now, is to, we took care of that part about the increase and decrease of the school district. Now the motion before us would be to say, the assembly shall approve the budget of the school district as amended and appropriate the necessary funds at least 60 days prior to the end of the fiscal year of the school district, and put that after the previous addition to
There's a
605.
What?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that somebody, a school district person reading and comparing the two sections might then wonder why we didn't also put into the school district section the provision that if the assembly fails to enact within a certain... Well, that's another sentence. I mean, one sentence says the assembly shall approve it within so and so many days, and the next 3 or 4 lines say if they don't, it's automatically approved. And you want all of that shifted over.
Yes.
Then you would add, if the assembly fails to approve the budget of the school district and make the necessary appropriation within the time state, the budget proposal shall become a budget and appropriation for the fiscal year without further assembly approval. Does that sound correct?
Okay, have we all got that now?
That's the right idea.
If the assembly fails to approve the school district budget, and that's an insertion on, as differentiated from the wording in 1305, and make the necessary appropriation within the time stated. Everybody have that?
Does that go back to 6?
Yes, that goes back, no, it's not going back, that's additional wording in 605.
Right.
And this wording remains here also. Is there a call for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I think, shouldn't we also consider changing that title to Assembly Action on Budget and 6-Year Plan to be consistent with the Assembly Action on the Municipal Budget? Does that seem logical?
Well, except that your 13 is what title? Starting out.
1305.
It's Assembly Action on the Municipal Budget.
I mean, 6. What does 6 start out as?
Budget and 6-year plan.
I'm wondering if it's Assembly Action that covers other things.
It's both school board and assembly action on the school budget.
There's another bag back there, Jim.
Are you talking to 605 or are you
Yeah.
Yes,
talking
at the title, or if that's enough now.
budget? I would think it'd be enough.
Well, Article 6 starts out by saying, well, the school system.
Rick, have we created a problem now in our references in 13 still to the school?
Marlis, you know, there are endless variations of
Yeah.
possibilities. I think that in B here, when we're talking about the transfer, the title of Article 13 is finance. It's a sort of a very general sort of category. And I think that the question of shifting funds from one account to another is a finance matter, whether it's applied to the school district or to the other funds. It so happens that we are creating a slightly different treatment for the school district. I don't think that makes it inappropriate to put it here. That's
So you're not unhappy then at what's left?
no, I don't really think so. Relative to what we would have to do to shift it all over from here.
There's also, to bring it up, there is also in 1308 the question of line 17, obligations otherwise incurred are void.
Okay.
We were going to delete that. Is there?
Where is
Mr.
that?
Chairman,
It's page 19, line 17, obligations otherwise incurred are void.
I so move.
Second.
Moved by Sheffield,
Do what?
Parsons.
Mr. Kern has some problems with that.
All right, you got it on the floor anyway. Mr. Garner?
Not so much a problem, Mr. Chairman. I did want to state what I think the situation is there. The old charter, the 71 charter, of course, does have that language, and the model city charter also has language to that effect. I think most charters, if you checked it, would. I think the idea that the problem that was raised by Norm is a very sympathetic one. That is, you don't want a vendor to have provided services and goods and then not be able to collect for it. The problem that this is aimed at is not that problem, I don't think. The problem here is somebody, an officer of the municipality, committing the municipality to pay money for services in the future. Say the manager hires a consultant for several $100,000 a year and enters into a contract with him. The municipality presumably wants to be able to dishonor that contract prior to the rendering of any services. Otherwise, it's possible that the person who made the contract can say, look, I have a legal contract which I want specifically enforced. Now, in the case of a vendor, a person supplying goods or something, who actually does something, he provides so much grass seed or whatever, he will not be without remedy, because even if even in the face of this provision, the court will award him the fair value of the services he's actually rendered. So I think that the danger that was suggested is not quite as real as we might
Danger
fear.
of not having it.
But there's a distinct danger, it seems to me, of not having it, particularly in light of the fact that most other charters do have it. I guess that's the way I feel.
I think I'd accept Rick's explanation.
And withdraw.
And
Yeah, leave it in.
Leave it there. Mr. Chairman, I have one other question.
Motion withdrawn.
Norm mentioned the question in relation to categories.
Yes.
And did you find a better definition of that? Or
Well,
do you suggest a different word?
yes, we didn't, I did want to define the idea here, because I think it's an important idea. The point was to let the Assembly decide by determining what an appropriation would be, what sort of leeway the mayor would have in transferring funds. Okay, now when we talk about categories within an appropriation, I think we're just talking about proposed actual expenditures from an appropriation. The appropriation is designated, and that sets the limits as to who can transfer what. And within an appropriation, we do allow the mayor in certain circumstances to shift and make choices among how the ways the money can be spent. So I would say that the term categories within an appropriation means actual proposed expenditures to be made from funds appropriated. I would add in the definition section a new item, quote, categories within an appropriation, because when we use the word categories, it's in that phrase, means actual proposed expenditures to be made from funds appropriated. As if we
Okay,
haven't.
that makes sense.
I would accept that
Yeah,
as a
that makes
reasonable
sense.
definition.
And that should clear up Norm's problem. Yeah, that does make sense.
Okay.
So tonight.
Is there any further discussion on 13? Ms. Parker?
In section 1308B, with the $1 million limitation that we've put in there, Bob Nelson said that he didn't feel that we should put a money limitation within the charter, since it will go on for who knows how long. And Norma Beck spoke on the other way, and I was just wondering if we wanted to keep this $1 million limitation in there.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, may I go back to...
Mr. Josephson?
May I go back to the categories matter again? If I listen to the definition, would you read the definition again?
Categories within an appropriation means actual proposed expenditures to be made from funds appropriated. And the effect of that, as I understand it, is to permit the mayor, in the case where the Assembly has decided that, for instance, it will make one appropriation to the Department of Widgets, the mayor has the latitude within that appropriation to shift money around.
I know that, but when you say from funds appropriated, I don't know that you're picking that up, because funds appropriated would be anything in the municipality.
Okay,
But then
I'm sorry,
It
let's
could be
say,
line item, or it could be larger, a larger group.
let's say from an appropriation, to be consistent.
That's all right.
I think that's right.
Because
Then you define the word with the word,
I think you're right.
and I don't think that's
So
good.
then to find what categories, then you have to look to appropriations the first time.
maybe you should justify categories, then, not the phrase.
Okay, fair
And
enough,
you need transfer.
fair enough.
You get another crack at it.
Categories means actual proposed expenditures to be made from an appropriation.
From an appropriation.
Well, any funds, total funds?
From an appropriation, in other words, an appropriation to the Department of Public Works. There were categories.
Well, my picture of a category within an appropriation, Department of Public Works, you would have a category of diesel fuel, and you'd have a category of salaries, and a category of
Isn't that what you said?
repair.
That's what we
That's
want.
what he said.
I didn't read it. I didn't hear it that way, Annie.
I
That's what you
think
said.
really
fine.
what Norm was saying last night is that you just about have to leave the definition of how much leeway the mayor had to the assembly to decide what they wanted to be an appropriation.
This is
I
what we
think
do.
that it's now okay.
Yeah, I
But
do too.
Lisa, did you have some? Jane?
Chairman, on page 19, section 1308B, line 23 and 24, I would move to amend that by deleting all the language after the word by and inserting a majority vote of those in the municipality voting on the question.
Let's see, would you do that one more time? After voters,
Okay,
you
let me
would do-
explain what it is and then it's easy.
Okay.
Because in the same manner as geo bonding and indebtedness, and all I'm saying is the language that we're going to have in election is easier to understand than this language,
Which is,
until approved by a majority vote of those.
until approved?
Can they not?
So approved by a
Until approved,
majority.
they're not.
Until approved by a majority vote of those in the municipality voting on the question.
Majority of,
Majority vote of those in the municipality voting on the question. Which is
in the municipality.
voting on the question.
Why do you have to say in the municipality?
That's the exact words that we use in 1502 to describe the process for geo bonds. You can change it if you want.
Is-
Does that mean?
Voting on the,
You don't want absentee voters.
Yeah.
Well, we could just say people voting on it, I don't care. People voting on the question?
Majority vote,
I think it's a
only
good
voting
suggestion.
on.
Seconded, Ben.
Moved. And seconded. Who moved? Jane moved? Arliss second.
Question?
Mr.
Special
Chairman,
call, all those in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
I think that by the majority of those voting on the question is sufficient, because you might have a place where you wanted to acquire it just for service area rather than the whole general area, and I think that that's more desirable.
Leave out in the municipality.
That's right, leave out in the municipality and say by the majority of those voting on the question, because that leads it to
Would it
possibility
be
of
those
being a service area.
qualified to vote on the
Those
Of
required to vote on the
the
question.
qualified voters voting on the question or something.
All right, something to amend it so that it could be in the service area rather than the whole
Lisa.
municipality.
Really, how could
Lisa?
it be in a service area? If a service area wants to take on a service, and they vote to take on the service, they vote on it, but does the whole rest of the municipality vote on it too?
No.
Just that service area,
Yeah.
and so then,
In some cases, if it provides for bonding, the whole municipality might vote on it, but in case of just a service area providing a service, the whole area would not vote on it.
Because it would be their tax that would be repaying for it if it were just a lease purchase sort of thing.
you don't want the whole thing, the community behind it, et cetera, et cetera.
No. The whole place.
Don't need the whole thing for a lease purchase.
Okay, so the wording is now majority of voters voting on the question.
How about qualified?
Qualified.
Qualified voters show voting on the
Or
question.
what other kind of...
Yeah, qualified voters,
Second,
majority of qualified
The
voters.
qualified voters voting on the
Well,
question.
qualified does pick up the possibility.
They, The motion would now read to strike, delete everything after the word by in line 22 and add after the word by a majority vote of the qualified voters voting on the question.
No vote after majority, so we don't use the word vote three
A
times.
majority of the qualified voters voting on the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
Question on the section.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question in 1309 at the top of page 21. It says the municipality may borrow money for any public
Mary,
purpose.
that's the order here, the
Oh,
order.
I'm on the wrong page. Excuse me. I'm flipping over one. Excuse me.
Chairman,
Jane?
section 1309, I just have a question about the article, because it sounds to me like it was a contradiction. Which says that we'll make competitive bidding situation, and you can also make exceptions for competitive bidding.
Right.
Yeah, we
No,
discussed
read
this
that.
a long time. I can't remember what we
I
done.
remember the discussion, I don't remember the resolution right now. So if
Well,
anybody can review that for me, I'd
This has
appreciate
to
it.
do with situations where there's only one source of supply.
Sole source.
We have allowed negotiated bid. They speak of negotiated bids, which is not really a straight bidding procedure.
Telephone.
And
There are also ethical situations where you cannot have competitive bids by certain professionals.
Mr. Chairman, but Jane, I think what we're saying here is that they shall establish an ordinance that provides for it, and also that same ordinance may provide for those exceptions.
Yes. So that it's not,
That's really what it's,
so that it's not an ad
it
hoc
must be
kind of-
spelled out in that ordinance.
All right, I understand that.
Do you?
The way it reads is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the ordinance for exceptions
Would be the same. Maybe we need to tighten it up.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should move to put for specific exceptions.
Well, I think she wants to say that the ordinance spells out, that same ordinance spells it out, and that's not clear. Is that right, Jane?
Oh, and shall make provision for exceptions as any.
Specific exceptions.
And shall make provision for any exception.
Okay.
Well,
Do
the
we
wording
make
is awkward, I think.
My preference is that we do not have an ordinance that says, these are the exceptions to this rule. What I would like is, each time we have a competitive bidding situation that requires that we can't have competition, that we have an ordinance that says, in this situation,
Well, that's just reverse. I disagree with that. I think that you want to have it in advance of the special interest coming in and carrying around. You want to have the rules.
okay,
laid
okay,
out.
I agree.
You gotta have your procedures set out in black and white.
Joe, move your wording, why don't you?
Well, all right. On the last line, I would move to delete may, insert shall, and before the word exceptions, insert the word any.
Second.
Are there any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, so ordered. I have the main motion before us now, made by Mr. Parsons, seconded by both Ms. Parker and Ms. Troney, to approve Article 13 as amended.
Question.
Questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Article 14.
Second.
Taxation.
On line 13, you gotta change your journal to regular again. That should just be a common one motion.
Yeah,
we
thing.
don't better
care.
note it.
Way too, except maybe you might miss it when you're typing.
Note it, please. We may miss one.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
No.
Parker? She may.
You're not the chairman. In 1401A, the second sentence, the taxing power may not be surrendered, delegated, suspended, or contracted away except as provided by law. What does law provide?
For a number of mandatory exemptions from the taxing power, covering, for instance, religious, educational, cemetery property,
Those over
special assessments
senior
for
citizens.
farmland, etc.
Is there any further discussion on Article 14, taxation?
Question.
Can I ask
Yes. There's no further discussion.
Didn't you have nothing?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
a
So ordered.
And this two made and seconded.
Arliss made and Jim seconded.
Chairman, I move for approval of Article number 15.
Mr. Chairman, I now am to where I tried to do you before. On the authority, on the top of page 21,
By 21, Mary.
it starts out from the bottom of page 20 and it's labeled authority, and then 20 at the top of page 21 it says the municipality may borrow money for any public purpose and issue its evidences of indebtedness thereof. Are we giving carte blanche for them to hawk the municipal property and go down and borrow it for anything under the sun? It looks to me like we may be if we don't do some specifying there. Not against tax notes, not against tax anticipation notes or anything else. We haven't specified how, what they're going to put up for hawk.
Question of the attorney, Mr. Chairman. What does public purpose mean? Well, you know, Jim, there's a lot of litigation on that point. I guess the one that comes to mind, even in Alaska, there's a lot of litigation. For instance, in Juneau, when the city was going to buy land and give it to the state for purposes of enhancing the capital area, that was attacked, and the court ruled that that was not a public purpose. And there's a lot of discussion. It's difficult to say exactly, but it has to be something that in your heart you feel benefits the body politic as a whole, you know. That's what it's
That's why I might be.
You think that the statement public purpose covers any kind of broader carte blanche situation in this? This is not a limitation as to amount. As you know, some particularly earlier charters and constitutions had debt limits. You can't borrow beyond 2% of assessed value or something. We do not have a dollar limit. The public purpose limitation is very standard, but that relates only to the idea that you can't buy property to give to a particular group of people for a particular purpose, other than the public.
Well, the thing that, pardon me, if I may, the thing that Mary, I think, was speaking to and is that they can go downtown and presuming they find a bank to do it, hawk the borough building for $500,000 or whatever they felt like.
That's right, that is.
For just almost any purpose without any limitation.
Well, the only limitation here is the term public purpose, which is...
But it doesn't limit the type of borrowing that they can do.
That's right.
It doesn't limit the term of it or anything.
Yeah.
Neither the period.
I wonder what's normal, or what would be perhaps more appropriate.
You limit the term in the tax anticipation notes, and you limit the term in bonding. You don't limit the term, but you place certain restrictions on bonding. And then,
footnote.
I don't know whether you'd consider any borrowing, any public borrowing as general obligation. I suppose it would be in a sense.
Maybe we should say something like, consistent with this article or in accordance with the procedures set forth in this article, to tie it to specific forms of borrowing.
As given in the following procedures or something, but unless we,
You know, may I read from the city, for instance, city section under general authorization to borrow money. The city shall have the power to borrow money for any public purpose and to issue its evidences of indebtedness therefore. Such evidences of indebtedness shall include but not be limited to those enumerated in the following categories. And then they limit to bonds for capital improvements, GO, and special assessment general obligation bonds which are secured by revenue. But anyhow, that they go
It's
in,
not really a limitation, though, really.
and then they go into bonds, all kinds of great big huge section on it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any limitation even
That's not a
under,
limitation.
I don't see any limitation even under Title 29 of
putting the municipal property in hock in any manner.
There are amount limitations in the case of revenue anticipation notes that have to do with percentages, but there are no purpose limitations, and I understand that courts don't usually anymore give meaning to purpose, very much meaning or content.
The public purpose.
You know, there's been the cases that whether Washington State can spend money to advertise the Apple industry. And
Well, and we were discussing the Juneau land case.
If our philosophy is to give the assembly the tools, I don't know why we would be more restrictive than the state law.
Arliss, my only
Mr.
point
Chairman.
there was that the language from the city charter, I don't believe is really any more of a limit.
I see what you're saying.
that We just left out.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you've gotten quite what's bothering me. The municipality may not do bonded borrowing without voter approval, but here we have said that the municipality may do property hawking bond borrowing without the voter approval, and I don't approve of it. It could be to any limit in this first thing. You could do it for millions of dollars with no limitation without voter approval, and I think we ought to have a limitation above which it takes voter approval for any type of borrowing other than the tax
Chairman.
anticipation note that's going to be paid off within a year.
Rick?
It's clear, I believe, that no GO bonded indebtedness may be incurred without a vote.
That's
regarding-
right, but we haven't
And,
said it here.
well, you don't have to say the same thing in every sentence. If you said it once here in 1502, that is a limitation on municipal borrowing, period.
Furthermore, of course, Madras, the bond buyer, if we're talking about bonds, is going to want to know that it's a public purpose himself, because a bona fide public purpose. But you're speaking of a non-bond
A
situation.
non-bond
Yeah,
situation.
well, that's different.
But just run, maybe they're a little short this week.
Run down to the bank and borrow against the value of the property, and we've got
Just
no
borrow on,
limitation.
just borrow on the face of the city. Doesn't limit you to returning it at any particular time.
And these two items worry me. I think this is a open sesame to a poor administrator, a semi-thief.
I don't know. This seems like a general thing. Now, for instance, the city, now the last borough one called for, the municipality may borrow money and issue such evidence thereof herein called obligations as the assembly may determine necessary. And it looks like very much of a standard provision, doesn't it?
Title 29 says that they have the power to, I'm not talking about bonds now, they have the power, these are second-class boroughs, to borrow money.
I think that sounds like an umbrella thing that you've restricted in other areas.
I,
The whole
Frank, they're not going to go down
Yeah,
to
yeah.
bank or borrow money without the people knowing about it. You just don't,
Well,
take a city map and go down.
Oh, cool.
Big figure the city manager and borrow money. I'm so worried.
I can't quite see any bank lending without some basis
Without some,
in
without
law.
some assembly resolution,
The assembly would have control of it.
Well, but what bothers me is, does the assembly have the right to go out and hawk a piece of park on the basis that they want that much money
Well,
that hasn't been approved of by any bonded indebtedness,
On a public building?
But what about the section on
and
ordinances?
use it for
that
any
governs
purpose?
the park?
Are you sure they can?
All right, 2948.010 says municipalities have the following general powers. 12, to borrow money and issue evidence of indebtedness, period. I don't know,
well, that, you're probably right on that. It's there anyway, and I don't think any organization that loaned money would loan it without proper authority from the
I've just thought of how we could take care of my fear. Back there where we said lease or sell or encumber, if we added encumber, back there in where we were talking about ordinances required, where we spoke of leasing or selling, if we added the word or encumber
Well-
property.
okay, when you say that they can't, there are limitations, they have to do it by ordinance to convey an interest in property, that is incumbent on.
Yes, and when we go sell bonds, we also
Security
encumber.
interest in
Okay.
the
Okay,
That's-
I said.
We did, Mr. Chairman.
You're right,
Lisa?
Go ahead, Lisa.
you're right.
She's,
I wanted to move on to another section.
I wanted to comment just briefly. I did have asked Patty, and she did do it, to take Articles 13, 14, and 15 to Walforth and Flint today for their review. And apparently Eric did look it over. He called Frank and discussed certain items, and
He suggested
apparently did not see this as a problem.
Yeah, he didn't see this as a problem. In item number 2, in line 2, he suggested that it should be evidences, plural, add an S on the evidence. He wondered if, in 1503, if we needed to dignify the position of, by saying including reasonable limitation upon the sale of bonds and notes to financial consultants of the municipality. He didn't think that that would be necessary, and of course this was one of those places where we had extensive discussion on. He says that he wasn't
I
set
think we
by
should
for
leave it
anything.
there.
I do too.
And add the S as a,
Where does that is?
Line 2.
line.
The S in mine too, after evidence.
So it reads it's evidence of indebtedness therefore.
Page 21, line 2.
And he also,
Not make it.
Eric mentioned in 1502
Said you think you might make
that when the taxes or revenues anticipated are not received within the period, the Assembly may renew the note for a further period of not to exceed 6 or 12 months.
This is an addition.
This is in addition.
Oh,
What is,
sir.
in 1502,
Where?
B, tax or revenue anticipation notes shall be repaid within 12 months from their date of issuance. He suggested that there were cases where there were honest mistakes made in estimating revenue, or there's revenue shortfalls such as federal revenue funds that were anticipated don't show up for state or some other, and that or for some reason the revenue base is not as big as they anticipated it to be, and that perhaps it would be well to extend the year period by 6 months anyway, or 12 months to give them a...
Frank, this is the one you cared about more than anything.
Well, I'm telling you what
But I look
what
to you
month?
after talking to August Council here. What would you suggest? That's your ox.
All right. I think that perhaps he is correct, and that I would recommend not to exceed 6 months. And I asked him about that, and he said that should be plenty. He said that-
Not to exceed 6 months?
How are you going to get another tax receipt?
Huh?
How are you going to get another tax
Well, that's the
assessment?
total then of 18 months.
All right, but you only assess taxes every 12 months. And if you missed on your estimation of what you're going to get within that 12 months, you're not going to get another tax assessment for another 12 months. So if you
Well,
stop
no.
short of an additional 12 months,
Wait
where are
a
you going
minute,
to
wait a
repay
minute,
it?
wait a minute. Tax or revenue anticipation notes shall be paid within 12 months from the date of issuance. That's the first sentence.
Okay.
And then this adds another 6 months in case
What does
there's
it
a
say?
revenue shortfall.
All right, it takes 12 months to guarantee you've got one tax assessment period within it. How can you guarantee you get another tax assessment period without adding a full another 12 months?
Well, because your tax anticipation note would be within the or assistance zone, and that's all
All right, let me give you the date. Look at the timeline, Frank. For some reason, in July, that's right after our budget year ends, for some reason it becomes obvious that the federal government is not going to fulfill on something that we counted on very drastically, and we put out a tax anticipation note to cover that need for the coming year that we planned in. All right. Within 12 months, we said in our original statement, by the next July, it has to be repaid, because that gives us another assessing year. All right, come the next July. And the second time, you see, we're left. Now, what is another 6 months good going to do us? We're not to another assessing year.
Well, they should have known what was happening to them and had that whole year.
Why add any months? It's either at no months or at 12. Because you've not got another
Mary,
assessing
you
year.
are assuming it would be necessary to have another budget year to appropriate it.
No,
And-
another assessment.
All right, another assessment, but possibly it's just a question of mechanics that you weren't looking toward another assessment.
You might adjust your expenses too. You might shut down on your...
Rick, I see the point, I think, but let me just say that normally, of course, in the statute, I believe it says that they will be repaid by the end of the next fiscal year, which would anticipate the revenues, a new influx of tax revenues. So unless you want to limit the adjustments that they can make in the event of this shortfall to a cut in spending, I think possibly you do need to give the extra full year if you want to have the possibility of dealing with the problem by a new influx of revenue.
Well,
That's what's bothering me. If you're talking about the same type of revenue influx, it takes another complete year to do
I
it.
would just as soon keep it to the 12 months.
I think it will alleviate Mary's concern and most of this discussion.
All right. I am only telling you what
He wasn't really hung up.
he wasn't really hung up on it. He said he thought we ought to do it.
Leave it at the 12 or
I
go
know
to
that we have to be hung up.
But he indicated that was one of his questions, and he felt that we should do something.
We
about it.
really appreciate
Lisa?
his concern.
In section 1505,
1505.
yeah, in, with our conversation with Mr. Levesque last night, he requested that we delete in line 24, after obligations, the words "and interest and profits derived from the investment of proceeds."
Second.
And in line 26, or for payment of principal or interest or other charges with respect to the obligations, and I so move.
Yes.
I don't believe that the second omission was discussed, and I don't believe it's desirable.
Doesn't the second omission have reference to the first omission though?
No. At least if I can try to explain the first reference to interest and profits has to do with what comes from the proceeds. The second reference to it talks about how you're going to use the proceeds themselves. And it is desirable to use the proceeds themselves for repayment of principal and interest on the obligations, and to require that they be so used.
But didn't he say that if you approve like a $2 million bond, that that's what you want to use and you don't want to detract or add in any way?
No. Excuse me. I think what he was saying is that you don't, if the voters approve a $2 million bond issue for a certain project, the municipality should not be able to invest that $2 million and augment that $2 million with the interest and the profits and end up spending $2.5 million, say, on the particular project. And that's the ill that we cure by knocking out this first phrase. But the proceeds themselves, as the sentence would read, shall be used solely for either the purpose, the project in question, or if the total amount of money is not needed for the project, those proceeds themselves should be required to be used to pay back the principal and interest on the bonds. And that's the idea, I think.
But what if, could you interpret to mean, well, with the monies approved, we will take the monies out of that to pay for the interest and stuff like that? So if I approve a $2 million bond issue, that, okay, they take away $500,000 and they only spend like, really $1.5 million, and then that other $500,000.
Now that's a good question. As I understand it, though, when we omit this first phrase, we leave the possibility of using the interest and profits to handle the debt service, and that's an accounting matter within that.
But he doesn't want us to increase the
Right.
total amount with him.
But we won't be decreasing the $2 million either necessarily, because they can use the interest to handle the debt service, leaving you your net $2 million.
Well,
More or less.
Excuse me, but I got the impression that the interest then be used for any purpose.
That's right.
yeah.
That means
But it would be a wash, in other words, against the debt service, however you handle it.
But then you could still approve a $2 million bond issue and only end up with like $1.5 million going into that.
Yes, and
If that is all that was required
yeah,
for the
if that was
project.
all that was required for the project, the other $500,000, according to this, would have to be applied back to the bonds themselves rather than being used for some other project.
But I don't think that what you're worried about is, I think that there will only be $1.5 million available, and that the project won't be carried out properly. And I don't think that'll
It
happen.
won't be carried out properly.
Right. They don't have to use the $2 million to pay the debt service.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's... No.
If we can get through this one, I suspect we're at a point of,
Time to quit.
we're gonna have to have another meeting tomorrow. We're at the point of diminishing returns.
All right, and let me also state that that Eric Walforth, in looking this over, agreed
Chairman,
with
we have a
this
motion here.
deletion.
Yeah. And just delete
Seconded for the deletion, sir.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the deletion of,
Question.
now, Lisa,
It's just that
just that portion?
first part.
And interest and profits derived from the investment proceeds only. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? There being none, so reported.
Question on the main motion.
Question on the main motion. Acceptance of Article 15 as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Let's go home.
So we're down to 16. We've got 11 more pages to go. We made 11 this time. We made 11 the first time, so that looks like about what we can do in
What time
3
should we meet
hours.
in the morning?
And I think we should meet tomorrow early if we can get at it.
Anybody's willing to come.
What times are available to all?
Okay, I can meet early in the morning, but at 10:30 I have an appointment.
7 o'clock.
7.
7 o'clock.
That'd be
Go
great.
home quick. Go to bed, girl.
Christ.
Watch it.
Bring
May
your,
sit upon
bring
the
your whips
shoulders.
and leather,
Why 7?
because we're masochists.
What time,
All right.
I've got other things to do later in the day.
What time are you through? Got things to do.
7 a.m.?
7?
I won't be here at 7.
Okay.
I don't even go to work at 7 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
I'm gonna at least get my son off
8
to work.
o'clock? Any better?
At night anymore.
All right, 8 o'clock, 1?
I'll be here at 8.
8 o'clock? 8 o'clock?
I got
I don't care if she's
fixed
blonde
to
or
about
what.
9:30, so I have to go early and get done.
9 holes.
All right,
7 o'clock?
8 o'clock? Bill?
He says
Jim?
he's leaving at 9:30. That doesn't let us
8
get
o'clock?
done, Frank.
Yeah, we will. This will go fast.
Come on, Jim.
Yes?
Be a
No?
martyr.
Speak up.
Well, no, if we're gonna lose him at 10:30 and we're gonna lose him at 9:30,
We better back up.
Why don't we do it at 1?
I
that
can't.
ruins the weekend
Can't.
completely.
Let's back up
You
to
may
7
have to
and
be
get it
all day
done.
anyhow.
Well, I'm not going to.
Let's back up to 7, Mr. Reed.
You heard me.
Sunday evening.
Not even any amount of stroking is going to change my mind. We are snarly by that time. We've been together too long this week.
Yes, but
8 o'clock, did you say?
Let's back up to 7, Frank. We're not gonna get
Eat if I like, but I'll see you on board before I got We got 2 people who are gonna leave.
Let's back up.
what was the appropriate answer?
Well, we've got 4 now that can be here at 8 and work for an hour and a half
Deborah's right.
before we lose one. It's Joe.
Let's
No, Bill. And 2 hours and a half before we lose Joe. So
Let's back up to 7. If we're short one at one end,
Can
we
you
can
be
be short
here
one
at
at the other. You're not even a quarter
Lisa?
of 7.
Huh?
No.
No.
Can't you work tomorrow?
Jane, can you be here at 8?
Under duress.
I mean, you have to
I
work.
move that we place Jane under duress.
Rick, can you be here at 8?
Call the house.
Just work all day.
So, we have one who will not be here at 8. That's one, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us here.
That was
Don't
counting.
point me.
And that'll be 6 here for an hour and a half. And then we lose one.
When can you come, Lisa?
Can you come at 9? Listen,
What you got on the
Tell you
board
what,
tomorrow, Lisa?
It's the last,
Yeah, it really
You
the
have
last
to.
sprint to the wire.
yeah.
You seem to have it not.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we have to, because you're leaving town. We've got to get her with
What
us.
time you leaving, Lisa? Are you leaving town tomorrow?
I was going to, but I'm not
Rick
going
is
to.
leaving Sunday. Rick's leaving Sunday. We gotta
So
go
am I.
tomorrow.
I'm going to survey.
And you're going too. Yeah, we've got
We
to.
gotta do it tomorrow, but we'll go back quick, folks.
Sherry gonna be back in town.
Not until Sunday morning, right?
Not until the 22nd. You get here about,
I'll get here when I get here.
okay. early.
If there's not
8
6 here,
o'clock.
we might as well not
I
come.
can see your bright and smiling face now.
Okay,
coming in.
we have 6 at 8 o'clock. We have 6 until,
Well,
come
we
in
have
until
7. We
9:30.
have 7 at 8 o'clock.
30. Do I have a bid for 9?
I'll make the bid for
We
now.
have 7 at 8 o'clock.
Well, now,
Just one extra.
do we anticipate, what is the, are there
Now,
big
what
hang-ups in
is
what we have
our
left?
life from now on?
Who wants to call Fred Time, tell him to be here at 8 o'clock?
I will. I'll have no problem.
Just be delighted.
I'll call them and I'll chew all over the place.
This, I might say that this stuff has been looked at a little more recently, and it should not be
So difficult.
difficult. We just went over the transition.
How about everybody going home and doing a lot of homework tonight?
Oh,
I think it's
Really
fair.
You know what my homework is?
The more we read, the more problems we got.
I'll tell you what my homework is. My homework is to get my yayas out so I'm decent to live with in the morning.
Now, I don't know what they are, but I know I'm afraid to ask.
I don't think I would,
Well,
all right.
You gotta educate me.
This meeting is adjourned until tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
It means you gotta get it on.
Stuff right here and hope that nobody.
You gotta boogie.
This is my spot in the morning.
Well, yell at the ball game if that suits your fancy. but
Can we
you gotta
just
get
leave
your
this
yayas.
blob on the
Yeah.
floor
Yeah.
or on the table?
Okay.
Leave everything where it is.
Patty, I'm sorry you got hooked up with such a raunchy outfit, but that's the way it is.
You guys have been going at it since February.
Patty, I'm sorry that people here think that we're raunchy, but put up with it well.
I'm not speaking for you.
Right on.
Bring your
Yeah, I guess we're ready.
Wait, of course, when we get this. Would you please? How's that? Oh, no!
Small between sections and 303 recall. We're just doing your job for you, Patty, so you don't have to spend all the time.
Where is that?
Correct. Just under second, just space before 303. Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor? Those opposed? So ordered.
Mr.
Article 4, Mr. Josephson. Pardon me, just a minute.
I want to know what
I'd like to say
her vote.
one moment first. Ty, I understand your wife is around here somewhere.
She left.
I was going to suggest that somebody can take you home. Seeing she already left.
Somebody will take you home.
Somebody follow go home. Yeah. Thank you for your consideration. You can sleep in the office.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question, and it was back here in Article 3, I guess, really. Has anybody ever found out for sure what 25% and 15% would amount to in numbers of votes?
No.
I think we should, before we leave that for the last time.
Oh, and no.
We're damn near committed now. I don't know where we're going to find that. Well, you
Well,
can find it out tomorrow. I'll thank you to find it out
I asked
tomorrow.
Mary today, but she was too busy to look it up for me. I did try to do my homework today, sir. I think I can probably get it tomorrow.
Right.
Parker?
Move to number 4.
Second.
Question. Moved by Parker, second by Sturgill. Adoption of Article 4 is submitted. Question has been called.
Mr. Chairman,
Alice?
just on line 21, very hyphenated problem on qualification of its members.
Page?
Very simple. Page 5.
Divided at the wrong spot, she says.
Legal call is.
Is it legal?
Yeah, that's right.
What are we talking about?
Okay.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Call.
Yeah.
Between any syllable, qual,
All right.
Okay, I was an English reader, but I didn't do terribly well.
Any further discussion on Article 4?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Roney?
I move we add on line 14, are not extended to 3 years.
Same page.
On page 5,
Not extended.
line 14, from single-member districts are not extended to 3 years. I will have to admit that when I reread through this when it was cold, it wasn't perfectly obvious to me what this sentence was intended to do. And I believe that this makes it clear.
Well, no, wait a minute, though. I'm a little scared that,
In the event of a
that by
change,
implication says that they can make 5-year terms for themselves.
in the event of a change from a plan containing all single-member districts to a plan containing some or all multi-member districts, the terms of incumbents elected from single-member
I think
districts
that
are
says it
not
right there.
extended.
The state is 3 years, and then maybe they go to 4.
Now, I have questions.
Really, it says they can go no further, Mary, and I think that's our intent. To 3, 4, 5.
All right, then may I substitute extend beyond the date at which they would have ended otherwise.
Or beyond the regularly elected term.
Beyond the terms for which they were elected.
Beyond the terms for which they were elected, I would accept that, but you need some modifying sentence words after that.
Beyond the terms for which they are elected.
Is that your amendment, Mary?
Yes, I would
Terms
accept
are
that
not extended
substitute.
beyond the terms.
Who seconded Mary's substitute amendment? Seconded by Parker.
Could that be restated by Rick?
The word terms, it appears twice that way.
Well,
The terms of incumbents elected from single-member
Yeah.
beyond the term for which
Or
elected.
beyond the dates for which they were elected.
You're talking about terms, and you got,
when you talk about a term in the first instance, I think there's no possibility of talking about anything but the term for which they were elected. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if new words are desired, but I don't think it adds to the meaning.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why don't we eliminate that whole sentence?
I would be perfectly happy with eliminating the whole sentence. I would accept that.
Well, that is a substantive change.
I would accept that also.
Mr. Garnett, you had a comment?
Mr. Chairman, no particular comment except that obviously that does change the meaning of the thing and that it opens up the possibility of incumbents who were elected for a 2-year term having their terms extended to 3 years in the event that a reapportionment results in some persons being elected from multi-member districts.
Well, my concern is that it implies things about single and all multi-member districts that I don't think we had previously written into it.
We did write the difference between a 2-year term and a 3-year term. 2-year term for single-member districts and 3-year term for multi-member districts. So it does reflect the...
yeah, it's,
Thank you.
Lisa has a question.
I have a question.
5.
Okay, in this apportionment plan that we have in the charter, does this fall under, do the 5 districts fall under the multi? And does the single fall under the single? Or does this fall under the sum?
We're talking, there are only 2 categories, all single or some or all multi. And that's a some or all multi. So you got 3-year terms.
We
Some are
state
all
some
multi-
or all there, right in there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And some are all multi, also includes at large.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote against the Mary's amendment because just in reading it, I think that where we specify the terms of incumbents and not extended, we're talking about specific terms for incumbents, and I really think it's clear. I think this other wording is really saying the same thing, sort of go on and on. Question?
Question has been called. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Fong?
you are specifying a specific case in which the terms of incumbents elected are not to be extended. And we have in our borough twice within the last 12 months, or within the last 18 months, proposed extending terms for short periods. And if you start in this at one place, you may be specifying where you can extend terms. Are you not implying that you may extend terms in all other cases?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're speaking to a very specific, I think, well-defined set of circumstances. And I do think that you would have the flexibility to do exactly what you're saying. And we also state, elections can be put off, and I think that's appropriate.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Joseph?
let me just suggest that maybe that sentence can be eliminated on the basis that the first two sentences don't talk about whether the apportionment plan is single member or multi-member, but whether the assemblymen serving were elected from a single member system or a multi-member system. Is that correct? So that even if the plan changed from single member to multi-member while they were in office, since they had not been elected on a multi-member basis, there could be no extension of their term.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly agree, and I think that the elimination of the sentence altogether is much better than leaving it there.
Yeah, the problem is in the second sentence we say if some or all assemblymen are elected from multi-member districts, the term of an assemblyman, which could include a previously elected single-member district assemblyman, is 3 years.
Should we go with such assemblyman?
Well, you could. Let's see, if some or all are elected from multi-member districts. The term of such assemblyman is 3 years.
You're saying that
It gets fairly fine logically, but you see what I'm saying, Joe, about that second sentence?
well, let's think about it a little more. When would this change take place? It could take place at a special election.
Yeah, because we can change the apportionment by initiative and anything else.
Okay. So that you have a single member district plan, which we don't, this is very hypothetical, we don't have it yet. And then you have an election or some procedure that creates multi-member districts.
You have some single-member guys with
Okay.
only 1 year.
And then, but nothing changes. At that point, there are no assemblymen who have been elected under that system because it's a special proposition. Okay. Then at the new election, then you're saying all the 3-year term. Everybody has a 3-year term.
Those people whose seats are up at that point, yeah.
Didn't allow a constitution.
What about the old ones?
Well,
Are they extended or not? That's ambiguous, you think, that the last sentence.
Mr. Chairman,
Troy?
I think that the new legislative body can provide for a orderly succession without our putting this sentence in here, and I think that common sense will cause them to provide for an orderly succession Now, if we go putting that in, it may force everyone elected under that immediately to get 3-year terms, and they'd all be elected 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, without having orderly successions. And I think we're better off to eliminate this whole sentence.
Mr. Chairman, are we out of order on this discussion?
Yes, we are.
In what way?
Well, what's the motion?
The motion is to add beyond the term for which elected.
Call for the question.
Question is called. You want to go roll?
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, I intend to vote for the thing, and then I'm gonna move to eliminate the whole sentence.
Hank?
Yes.
Chai? Yes. Tony?
Yes?
Josephson?
No.
Parker?
No.
Parsons?
Yes.
Reed? Yes. Sheffield?
Yes.
Sturgeluski?
Popcorn, please.
Motion passed.
Chairman,
3.
I move that the sentence beginning on line 11 and ending on line 14 be deleted.
Second.
And it as amended in its entirety.
Yes.
Motion before the House. Is there a second?
Yes, I seconded it.
I ask unanimous consent.
Object.
There being an objection, I'll be a roll call vote.
Just a moment,
Is
please.
there any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to ask Rick now. You've been pursuing something, and I think we're getting weary, and it's very easy just to knock things out, and I think that can be dangerous. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Rick?
I think we are spending more time on this than it's worth, partly because if you change from a single-member district plan to a multi-member district plan, in all likelihood, you would require all incumbents to run again at that point. Therefore, I think it would become moot. On the other hand, if that's not the case, and I suppose there is a possibility of that not being the case, then this language does do something. Now, whether it does anything important enough to worry about in this manner, I really don't have anything further to say on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ronnie?
within the last 2 years, the Assembly changed from a part single-member district to a multiple-member district, and those with terms that should have gone on all continued on in an orderly manner without having to be re-elected at that moment. And I do not see the necessity for educating the new Assembly as to how to provide for orderly procedure. And I would like to see that that is left to them. I don't think it's essential to spell it out here. I would hope that they correct reasonable Assembly.
I have a motion. And it's been seconded to strike the sentence beginning on line 11 and ending on line 14 of 402A. Is there any further discussion?
question.
Question is called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
I'll go to roll call. Chai?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes?
Josephson?
No.
Parker?
No.
Parsons?
Yes.
Reed? Yes. Sheffield?
Yes.
Sturgill?
No.
Hamvick?
Yes.
6-3. Motion passed. That sentence is stricken. The main motion before us now is made by Ms. Parker and seconded by Mr. Zaluski.
Small question. Rick, on 404D, are you going to change that so that it's not so restrictive?
I would, yeah, I think in order to accommodate what discussion brought up before, you would say something like all votes except on procedural motions, something of that sort.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yes, let's be very clear about this. Voting shall be by roll call or electronic device. The electronic device is a way by which a roll call vote is conducted, and I don't want to be understood to be that what we're saying is that in lieu of a roll call where the parties voting are accountable, you can flash green and red lights, and then everybody forgets what those meant, and there's no record of the green and red lights. Can you clarify that for us?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I am not really sure what is intended here. I say except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call. And then we say all votes shall be recorded, assuming that some procedural votes are verbal and therefore are very difficult to record. We need to limit the second sentence. Now, knowing not very much about the way these things work, I would say all votes except on procedural motions, picking up the same sort of exception, shall be recorded. But I'm open for further instruction on the point.
Well, I don't know. The last sentence, all votes shall be recorded, may merely mean that the minutes have to reflect that a motion carried or passed. That doesn't.
The votes of all
except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call, and then to say something that in the roll call, electronic devices may be used.
Why do you have to mention electronic devices?
Because the literally, it might require that the clerk call the names of the individual. Except on procedural vote. Voting shall be by roll call, was your suggestion? And then a new sentence, electronic devices may be used? Except on procedural motions, this isn't as good as it should be either. Voting shall be by roll call. For the purpose of voting, for the purpose of roll call, the Assembly may utilize an electronic device.
Mr. Chairman, as I understood it, Joe, you wanted to get across the idea that not only shall votes be recorded, that is so many yeses and so many noes, but the votes of each assemblyman shall be recorded except on procedural motions.
Yes.
So that's the new wording we need to get into.
Saying big?
Well, except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call and recorded. Electronic devices may be used to call the roll.
I think that Rick said it shorter.
What did Rick say?
I think to repeat it.
Well, forget.
He heard it very good, and he said it.
If you can't remember,
I'm
that's
getting
anything good.
I can put it down, but what I want to clarify is the additional idea of recording the votes of individual assemblymen as opposed to just the vote itself. Yeses and noes.
Voting shall be by roll call. There's no, this is discussion at the moment. There's no vote motion on the floor.
I think what he said was something to the effect that all assemblymen's votes shall be recorded.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would leave the first sentence alone and say something like, except on procedural motions, the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded as the second sentence.
And I think that's sufficient.
No, I don't think so. Oh, I see what you mean, because you're then saying, you're making it clear that the electronic devices, that the results of that are still
treated in the last sentence.
Yes.
How, would you repeat that? And then you'd add a sentence.
Except on procedural motions. We got that part.
Okay, the first sentence
Yes, it's-
would be left alone. Then the second sentence would again pick up the exception for procedural motions and say, except on procedural motions, the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded. Or you could even just combine the sentences and say, and the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded. Except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call or electronic device, and the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, let me have that one more.
Moved by
Read the whole section as it would be, could you?
Yes, ma'am. Except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call or electronic device, and the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded.
Question? Mr. Chairman? Has there been a
Vote
motion on it?
absentee.
No.
Mr. Joseph.
Yes.
I moved.
And seconded? Yes. Okay. Then what happens on procedural motions? Don't you record the votes?
Well, the assembly shall maintain a journal of its proceedings as a public record would include the result of the procedural motion as well as the...
So we don't have to speak to them, huh?
No, I think the journal would show.
Would show the outcome of the vote without individualizing.
404D, the motion is to change the wording of D to read, except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call or electronic device, and the votes of all assemblymen shall be recorded.
Question?
Questions called? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, unanimous votes cast.
Question on the main motion.
Question on the main motion. The main motion is to adopt the Article 4 as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, unanimous votes cast. Article 5, Mr. Joseph.
I move to approve Article 5.
Second.
Motion by Josephson, seconded by Parsons.
Mr. Chairman, line 15, 5012D, misspelling on until.
Where's that?
Okay. Line 15. Page 7. Mr. Chairman,
Arliss?
line on page 8, line 12, isn't overall one word or have a hyphen?
I looked it up in the dictionary and it is,
You're proper, huh?
2 words?
2 words.
Oh, great. And then there's something missing, I believe, in line 14 there, C. Is there something missing?
moment, but at some point. Where are you?
Okay, 503C.
Oh, yeah, there is a line dropped out of there.
Yeah.
We have the words that are dropped. Well, let's see here. Let's see.
I've got it.
Have you?
The article reads, during the temporary absence or incapacity of the mayor, the manager shall assume the powers and duties of the mayor, except emergency and veto powers.
The manager shall assume the what?
The powers and duties of the mayor, except emergency and veto powers.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have a question here. Why did we provide differently for who was to act for the mayor during temporary absences and during,
I wonder if we could close that door, Pat. I'm getting
vacancies.
if the mayor dies or something, or he leaves office,
No.
becomes vacant from office. Why did we
To
provide
clarify,
differently? In one case, we provided that the chairman of the assembly would act, and in this case, we provided that the manager would act. Why did we provide differently?
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that if the mayor went out of town for a 3-day trip, there's no point in having the chairman of the assembly taking over when the administration is functioning. On the other hand, if it's a very permanent situation, the mayor just isn't among us anymore, then it would be incumbent upon the assembly to respond and the election process to proceed.
Where are you speaking to, Mary?
All right.
line 14, the line we inserted.
The line that we inserted there, but there is another place somewhere in this document later where it says in
Well, that's
case,
what he's questioning, where that is.
well,
He said that.
I think it's in vacancies.
in vacancies. Yeah.
But we're talking about temporary absence here.
All right. Why do we treat a temporary absence by replacing the mayor with one man and a vacancy by replacing him with the other?
Could we find the part that was
It's on page 11.
All right.
I have now found it. Okay.
Good. He's got a lot of back, poor chairman would be going back and forth all the
I think it
time.
is. I'm looking.
Would we be referring to page
12?
Okay, page 12.
This is in the question of a vacancy, which is really quite a...
There's a difference.
All right. Then we're going to have the power of attorney from the mayor, both for the chairman and for the manager. So that in case bonds have to be signed or something, or in case legal papers have to be signed during the temporary vacancy.
I have a question of Ms. Brooks. As a policy question, would you rather have the manager acting in the vacancy situation when the voters didn't elect that person?
Mr. Chairman, there's no power of attorney involved in the vacancy. When the vacancy occurs for one of the clauses in 701A, that's a fixed time. It's a moment certain, and at that point, by operation of the charter, without anybody doing anything more, the chairman of the assembly is the acting mayor.
My personal feeling is that somebody who, in a situation where a vacancy occurs, someone who is elected should be running the show.
Agreed.
In a temporary absence when the guy's out of town, the manager seems to me better suited than the chairman of the assembly, who you'd have to spend all day educating about what we're doing.
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
I know that at present the presiding officer of the assembly acts in any official capacity that he would have. And I rather question, and that doesn't mean that he takes over the administrative duties that the administrative manager is handling day in and day out. But it does mean that for specific duties that are specifically said that the mayor does, in that case, it is the president of the assembly that has been acting in that. And I rather question having two people do it at two different times. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. It looks like to me like it is.
Well,
Say something.
Is there a motion on the floor aside from adopting the whole thing?
No, there's nothing.
Can I bring up
Well,
my help with the conversation?
Well, I would move that we substitute for that line, that the chairman of the assembly act during the temporary absence or incapacity of the mayor.
Jeff. Mr. Chairman, we have a system here which has a separation of branches. And I don't want to create a situation in which every time the mayor goes to sign a bond in New York, his nemesis, especially the way we're setting up this thing, if we hold to our rotated election system, occupies his seat. I think that if he has selected a manager on the basis of professional qualifications and he has been in turn confirmed by the assembly, there's really nothing wrong in those kind of short periods, especially when he doesn't exercise a veto or emergency power, to let that guy fill the office of mayor. And I just don't want to get into a situation where the mayor is afraid to leave town. And that's
I
what I think.
accept your argument, Joe. I accept your argument, sir. Thank you for pointing it out. I wish to withdraw my motion.
Motion's been withdrawn.
We have
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I don't have a motion, I just have a question. In section 501E,
Oh, she's
asking a
question. Yeah, right. We say that the mayor's salary cannot be reduced. Do we want to talk at all about the salary being raised? 501E on page 7.
be raised. There's no, it can be raised.
Okay, I realize it's set by the assembly, so he isn't raising his own, but I'm just curious if we want to talk about it at all.
No.
In light of...
Still don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
Still don't talk about it.
All right.
Question on the
My motion was moved by Mr. Josephson, seconded by Mr. Parker.
Now, the only new thing is the chief fiscal officer language may not have been reviewed by.
I like that word custodian.
It's basically the language in the statute for the office of municipal treasurer. I plagiarized.
It's included in the motion. Mr. Chairman, I do have one question. We had some discussion under boards and commissions as to whether, does this wording allow for the assembly to appoint such as a budget review committee or an ad hoc committee? We had discussion on this, and I thought we came to some resolution. Does that ring a bell with anyone but me?
Now, didn't we provide a specific section that says the assembly can hire professional staff, including fiscal consultants and so forth, as they deem necessary? I think that's still in it.
Did we decide that fiscal consultants could mean a budget body?
I'm not sure. I don't recall discussing that specific point. I thought we had fairly broad language we can look on.
Consultant can be anybody, can be a professional, it can be any form. You're thinking of a paid consultant.
No, I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking of a budget review committee is what I'm thinking of.
What does it say? Pursuant to ordinance, the assembly may engage such legal counsel, other professional advisors, and staff as it requires in the execution of its legislative
Professional
duties.
advisors. Could that be a lay body?
I would think that's pretty broad. I don't know exactly what kind of body it is.
Well, I have a budget review body, which could be like a board that could be set up by the... No, but it could be just people, such as the school board set up.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to add in there somewhere around